day in Harrisonburg. Thank you, and are you ready for an election in a week? Well, so am I. I thank you all for coming out this morning. I really appreciate it. Let's give her a great round of applause for Shelby for that great introduction. And for all the JMU Young Democrats, give yourselves a great round. And speaking of young JMU Democrats, I'd like to recognize my deputy campaign manager who has been traveling the Commonwealth with me for the last 5 years, but his biggest distinction, the former president of the student body of James Madison University, LeVar Stoney, who is actually... Well, I hear about the Dukes every day, folks, trust me. And I'd also like to recognize our amazing state chair, Charnel Herring. I know Charnel is here with us in her outstanding leadership. I was so proud to recommend her to be our great state chair, and I was proud to say that we now have the first African-American chair in the history of the Democratic Party of Virginia. I really want to thank my great friend, Delegate Clint Miller, who has worked incredibly hard for the Shenandoah Valley. Where is Clint? I want to stand up, Clint, give him a proud As you know, our campaign has rolled out a historic amount of Republicans who have endorsed my candidacy. More than have ever done it before, but it's folks who've come together in mainstream, bipartisan way. 12 former legislators have endorsed us. The mayor of the largest city in Virginia, Virginia Beach, never endorsed a Democrat before. And actually, President Clinton and I made a little history last night. We had a little event for us last night at the home of George Bush's finance chair at the Republican National Committee. So, folks, all coming together. We're trying to get everybody to come together. But you know, folks, there have been a lot of scary headlines in Virginia recently. Sequestration, cuts, drawdowns, shutdowns. And the truth is that even as we worry about the future, many Virginians are still hurting from the Great Recession. While our economy has slowly been recovering, there are still too many Virginians today who worry every day whether they have access to health care and can afford education. Not all the lost jobs have come back from the Great Recession, and people are now working 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. With the new economic headwinds that we're facing, only adds urgency to what we need to do. I am running for governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia to create jobs for every hard-working middle-class family. As a kid who grew up in a middle-class family, I understand these concerns. I understood at a young age that I was going to have to help pay for college. So I actually started my first business when I was 14 years old. I started paving driveways with the help of my mom. I used to make her every summer answer the phone in our home. McAuliffe driveway maintenance, like we were this big conglomerate, you know. But I got some barrels of tar at Kmart and started out going around doing, with my little red wagon, doing driveways, and then the next year I actually started doing parking lots. It's that opportunity to succeed is what we want to make sure that every Virginian has. For too many Virginians today, there are still too many obstacles. I am running with an incredible ticket. I am running for governor, but we have a great candidate running for lieutenant governor in Ralph Northam. And for Attorney General Mark Herring. Let me say this about the ticket. We are proud that we are Democrats. Also proud that our ticket is in the mainstream of Virginia. And this mainstream ticket is laser focused on the issues that matter most to Virginians. Less traffic, great schools, and economic opportunity for all middle class folks. Before we get into the important differences in this race, I wanted to take a moment to talk about a position that my opponent has taken that's been hard for a lot of Virginians to understand. In 2012, there was bipartisan support for the reauthorization for the Violence Against Women Act. It's a very important piece of legislation that helps local communities prevent and prosecute violence against women. Local prosecutors across the country praise it, and it's important on college campuses. It was first signed into law in 1994 by a president named Bill Clinton. Unfortunately, the reauthorization was being held up by congressional gridlock that's become all too familiar in Washington. So a bipartisan group of attorney generals wrote to Congress and urged them to pass the reauthorization. 47 out of 50 attorney generals, including very liberal Democrats and very conservative Republicans, came together to write that very important letter. They wrote that, quote, reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act will allow us to continue to make progress and save lives, unquote. Ken Cuccinelli was one of 3 attorney generals who refused to sign that letter. Now, that was bad enough, but his excuses made things worse. He first claimed that he didn't sign on to support legislation that could be amended. Then we found out that that wasn't true, because he signed on to 2 other letters in that category. Then he claimed that he simply stopped weighing in on federal legislation. But that wasn't true either. So he's run out of excuses. But he still has not explained to the Virginians why he doesn't support reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. It's just one more issue where he is way outside the mainstream. And it's not just the Violence Against Women Act. Ken Cuccinelli is always focused on issues that divide Virginians, attacking women's health care access and the Social Security that you've paid into. Let me be clear. I am focused on the issues that bring Virginians together, improving education and creating good paying jobs. The Tea Party ticket proposes an ideological and irresponsible plan that could lead to a budget crisis and devastating cuts to education. And recently, E.W. Jackson said that he and Ken Cuccinelli, listen to this, want to eliminate the corporate income tax in Virginia. Could you imagine what would happen with that? Our mainstream ticket thinks that the budget should be based on common sense, fiscal responsibility, and investing in our shared priorities like the best education system. Their Tea Party ticket views bipartisanship as betrayal and oppose the transportation compromise that will allow us to start reducing gridlock for our families. Our mainstream ticket views bipartisanship as a necessity because issues like jobs, transportation, and education are not partisan issues. Their Tea Party ticket is proposing an education plan that would divert money away from the public schools. I promise you, as governor, we are not going to take any money out of our public schools. Ticket believes that we have to invest in schools, students, and teachers if we want our children to succeed. A few weeks after the 2012 election, Ken Cuccinelli gave a speech to discuss what had gone wrong for the Republican Party and what they needed to do to actually correct it. It was his first big appearance since he had secured the nomination for governor. He started out by attacking those who say that the Republican Party should try to appeal to the middle. He said Virginians don't want, don't need, and sure as heck cannot afford a more moderate Republican Party. Ken Cuccinelli went on to say that this election, right now in 2013, is about showing that conservatism isn't dead. Well, Mr. Cuccinelli, I say this election is about creating jobs for hardworking Virginia families. Well, we create jobs and move Virginia forward by bringing people together and focusing on the right issues. When we know that the jobs of the future require specialized skills, we need to invest in our community colleges, which are the engines of workforce training in Virginia. I've been to all 23 community colleges in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We need to help workers gain new skills for a new economy, and that's what happens in our community colleges. But we've cut funding by 40% over the course of the last 5 years. We need to make sure that everybody in this room has access to financial aid so that you can afford to go to the institutions that you want to go to. Graduate from college with a lot of debt and no job, and that's what I'm going to work on for you every single day. When we know that science, technology, engineering, and math skills will be in high demand, we have to reform the standards of learning so that our schools are actually measuring progress on subjects instead of teaching memorization. Virginia pay to listen to this, very important, folks. When you take average Virginia pay to average teacher pay, we rank 50th out of 50 states. Virginia is one of the wealthiest states in America. We need to pay our teachers what they deserve. So we can recruit the best and retain the best teachers. Still discrimination in the Commonwealth. We have to work hard to make sure that everyone is treated equally in the criminal justice system. And when you have served your time, you should regain your right to vote. When we know that 400,000 Virginians can gain health care access, life-saving care by accepting the Medicaid expansion, we must act. Money coming back to Virginia will create 30,000 new jobs along the way. My opponent is opposed to accepting the Medicaid expansion. Last week he actually called Medicaid, quote, outright welfare. It's similar to his view of Medicare and Social Security, which he said were created by bad politicians to make people dependent upon the government. Well, I have a message for you, Ken Cuccinelli. Millie McAuliffe is 91 years old. She has paid into Social Security her whole life. She is not dependent on the government. This is her money. She worked for it. She deserves it. Now, let's get this clear. He doesn't want to accept the Medicaid expansion. But then he complains about Virginians who, quote, clog up the emergency rooms. And he was the sole sponsor of legislation, which was opposed by the hospitals, that would allow emergency rooms to fingerprint individuals who could not pay their bills immediately. Fingerprint. I mean, what does that actually mean? He opposes getting 400,000 Virginians covered by bringing Virginia's money back to Virginia. But when those 400,000 Virginians have to seek medical care and go to an emergency room, they could be fingerprinted? Folks, who thinks like that? The Republican Lieutenant Governor, Bill Bolling, said of his own party, quote, this is not just the most conservative ticket, it is the most ideologically driven ticket that we have seen in the history of our state. So folks, over the last last days of the campaign, the Tea Party is going to spend their time on personal attacks on me and not on the issues that matter to Virginia voters. Because they know, and as it relates to those issues, if this election is about the issues that matter to Virginians, guess what? They can't win. That's why I need your help now more than ever over the course of the next week. All of you in this room worked so incredibly hard in 2012. But even with the millions spent on television, everyone who really looked at last year's election understood that it was the grassroots energy and turnout that mattered most. For those of you in this room who worked hard in 2012 and haven't signed up yet, we need your help over the course of the next week. And for those of you in this room who are working hard on the campaign, we need you to dig just a little bit deeper. Don't worry about sleep over the next week. I always say, sleep when you're dead. You got plenty of time for that, folks. We need you over the next week. So over the next week, the most important thing we can do is face-to-face meeting with voters. It's important that they understand the stakes in the election that I just talked about, and make sure that they have a plan to vote. The way we do that is through GOTV. Get out the vote. And I know everybody has seen this card here. People, let me see your cards. Who has cards? I want to make sure every one of you, very good, very good. Give this group a round of applause over here. They're the best in the crowd. Folks, I need you to sign up 2, 3, 4, 5 shifts. This is important. It's so important that you sign these cards and you go out and make sure that people are actually going to vote. And you can sign up with our volunteers. If you get bored tonight, fire up TerryMcAuliffe.com. You can sign up on our website as well. I promise you this, folks. I promise you, if you help us over the next week, Ralph Northam, Mark Herring, and Terry McAuliffe, we will work our hearts out for you for the next 4 years doing the things we need to do to move Virginia forward. November, just before 6 o'clock, I'd been asked by the President's campaign to go out to Montrose Elementary School in Henrico County. There were hundreds of people still in line. We wanted to make sure no one left. I went out, gave out hot cocoa, coffee, snacks, hand warmers. I stayed for a couple hours. It was dark and it was chilly. But you know what? Not one single person left that line. Even families with school-age children. For them, voting was too important for their families, for their children, and their community. They were not about to let anyone silence them or take away their right to have their voices heard. Folks, we need that intensity again on November 5th. We need that intensity because we cannot allow Virginia to go backwards. We must ensure that Virginia continues to be a leader in higher education. We must attract the best jobs in the world. We must expand health coverage for the 400,000 Virginians. We must invest in education, our teachers, our parents, and our students. We must protect voting rights for all Virginians. We must be a state where gay Virginians are treated equally. And we must ensure that women have access to the quality care that they deserve. Are you ready to go? Thank you. The leader joining us today showed America what can happen when we focus on the economy and work with both parties. He brought together both sides to achieve a balanced budget and make our government more efficient. That led to record budget surpluses and, just as important, record low poverty. As president, he oversaw the creation of 22 million new jobs in our great country. The biggest expansion in modern history. But for him, it wasn't about the numbers. It was about the hardworking families in Hampton, Henrico, and Harrisonburg. That's why he fought so hard for the Family and Medical Leave Act, so that when you have a child, you can actually take time off and not worry about losing your job. And it's why he fought for Pell Grants and new teachers to give every child a chance regardless of their race, religion, gender, or where they were born. He understands the struggles of middle-class families. You know why? Because he's lived them. He was raised by a single mom in Arkansas and was able to afford college with scholarships and hard work. He has never forgotten where he came from, and he has never forgotten hardworking families. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to bring back to Harrisonburg the 42nd President of the United States.
First of all, I want to thank President and Mrs. Albert for welcoming me here. To JMU, I love being here. I thought Shelby Wilkes did a great job in her opening remarks, and I appreciate it. Especially about the Violence Against Women Act that she and Terry talked about. I'm very proud of that bill, and I'm appalled that anybody would oppose both extending it and expanding its reach. Thank you, Charnel Herring, for your leadership. Thank you to the Harrisburg Democratic Chair, Deb Fitzgerald, and thank you, Delegate Clinton Miller. But most of all, thank all of you. Terry gave such a good speech, he doesn't need me anymore, does he? I want to make just a few points briefly. First, one that he can't make on his own behalf. Terry McAuliffe and I are friends. He and his family and Hillary, Chelsea, and I, we vacation together. We've been through ups and downs together. I proudly participated in his father's funeral service in the magnificent Catholic Cathedral in Syracuse, New York. I know his mother, Millie McAuliffe, who at 91 would like to be here sticking up for her boy, and was glad to be used as an example of Social Security today. And here's what I know. First of all, he meets the first test of leadership. He overmarried. And I want you to welcome his wife, Dorothy, here. His literal big brother, John, Terry's brothers have been doing replacement duty every day. I got a different one, seems like, just to make sure he's all right. His niece Marissa there was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine, and Hillary and I recently took her back there, and it was quite a hoot seeing this Irish girl talking to the Ukrainians in their own voice. And she works for Hillary now. Hillary! They have 5 children, one of whom is in his 3rd year at the United States Naval Academy. So, here's what I know. If you elect Terry McAuliffe in a week, within a year of his becoming governor, half the people who vote against him a week from now will wonder what they were thinking about. Yeah. You will be proud he did. He is a good man. He will be a good leader. And you can see it in the values that he's lived in his family life and the way he's raised his 5 great kids. He is a good man. Second thing I want to say is, I'm qualified to be here because I was governor of my native state for 12 years. Some people thought I couldn't get a promotion. I I never got tired of being governor, and what I know, because my region of the country was in the shape the whole country is now for much of the 1980s. We were manufacturing jobs were being devastated, our farmers were in trouble. It was awful. And I don't care what anybody else says, the governor's real job is to empower people to succeed and then try to build an economy that gives them a place to go. And under the worst of circumstances, there is always something you can do to improve educational opportunities, which is why I approve of what Terry's advocating, everything from more preschool through the school years, more affordable access to college, and going to these community colleges, about which I will say a little more in a minute. There's always something you can do to improve infrastructure and to increase the investment in science and technology and innovation for a state. And Virginia has so many assets. It's really important that somebody get up every day thinking about how to build them up instead of how to tear the people up over some issue that won't shape the future, though it could wreak terrible injustice.
That's right.
And finally, it matters who's trying to get the jobs. I'll tell you exactly why. A lot of those Republicans were at that deal last night. It is kind of funny, isn't it, that we had President Bush's financier being the finance secretary. It was a great event. It was about half Republicans and half Democrats. About every 5 minutes, they look around and say, "Can you believe we're in the same room with these people?" It was funny. They were there because they know that he will take care of the main business of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he'll do a good job of it. And his opponent has a very different idea of what the job of the governor is, one that you would have to pay for. So I'm just telling you, I've done this job. And I started out, and our state had nowhere near the assets you did, so we had to build the first statewide network of community colleges. And we gave scholarships for tuition for everybody that graduated from any high school with a B average or more. And we took the bottom 25% of our people, the bottom 25%, out from under the state income tax. And we led the nation in job growth when I ran for president in 1992, but before that, there's been only 1 month in 8 years when our unemployment rate had been below the national average. This is hard work, but a governor can make a difference if the governor has the right priorities and can execute them. And he does, and he will. But the third thing that we've been talking about and around today is this is all rooted in your approach. And this election, for all of you who are students here, is kind of a metaphor of the 21st century world. Virginia was clever at some point in the past and decided to have its governor's races in the year after the presidential race. And only New Jersey does that, guarantees you plenty of coverage. And you've got to get plenty of coverage now because you have such interesting candidates. And they are so different. I think that's an understatement. But they are a metaphor for the struggles of the 21st century world across the globe. Here's why. For all of you who are younger, who are students here, you live in the most interdependent age in human history. Within and across borders. Borders look more like nets than walls. That means, as we have seen, to our joy and peril, good things and bad things can happen. An 8-year-old can get on the internet and find out something in 30 seconds. I had to go to college for it. That's the good news. Bad news is you can get on the internet and learn how to make a roadside bomb and kill a lot of innocent people. And there are thousands of other examples which you understand very well. In other words, interdependence means that whether we like it or not, we are going to share the future. So the real question is, what are the terms on which we will share the future? What do you want? I think the only objective that makes sense is to say we want shared opportunity, shared prosperity, shared responsibilities, and a shared sense of community. We don't want to obliterate our differences. They are important, and they make life more interesting. But we have to believe that our common humanity matters more than that. That's the only way to get through this thicket. Now, if you believe that, then you look around the whole world and look at America and you see there are two dominant ways of proceeding. You can be for the politics of creative cooperation, in which you don't ask people to give up their philosophy. You don't ask people not ever to disagree with you. You don't ask for an end of debate. You want it. You want it. You know none of us are right all the time. And you know it's healthy in a society to have some of us who, in the Democratic Party, we're really concerned that poor people aren't left out and left behind. We think it really is terrible that middle class people go a decade without a pay raise. We don't like it when people have to drop out of college, and now increasingly even community colleges, because they think they can never pay their debts. But it's also a good thing to have people who say, look, most people do have jobs, the economy is working for most people. We don't want to solve the problem at the expense of messing up the engine of growth. And we've got to be fiscally responsible. We've got to pay our bills and make things work out. And if you have that debate and you focus on any specific challenge, and people have good hearts and goodwill, chances are you'll come to the best available decision, the cooperator. And then you have people who say, no, I'm right. I don't have a philosophy, I have an ideology. If you have an ideology, it means you know the answer before you see the evidence. Just the fact that you believe in it makes it right. And your politics is the politics of constant conflict. There's something wrong with people that disagree with you. And that's what you've got here. You take this Medicaid fight. Should Virginia participate in the new Affordable Health Care Act's version of Medicaid expansion? I want to make it simple because I don't think most people understand what's at stake. Right now, there are a lot of people without insurance. For hospitals like university teaching hospitals and big city hospitals that see a lot of those uninsured people, they usually do see them in the emergency room. Because those people don't get health care until they're too sick to go anywhere else, and most of them cannot afford to pay. Now, under the old system, they got a specific check from the federal government called a DISH payment, a disproportionate share payment, because they bore a disproportionate share of the burden of uninsured care. Now they don't need that anymore if poor people are covered by Medicaid. So when Mr. Cuccinelli or anybody else said, we don't want to participate in this, we don't want this Medicaid money, what they're really saying is, okay, Virginia, you gave us the money at the federal level, and you don't want it back. You want us to send it to Nevada and New Mexico and California. You want us to take your money and send it somewhere else. And you want us to leave your hospitals holding the bag for the cost of the uninsured, which means everybody else's insurance costs are going to go up. That's what this is about. Divide and conquer. Make people so blind, but philosophically you don't understand. You have to hate the federal government. Don't bother me with the facts of this. If Medicaid is for poor people, it's by definition welfare. Let me tell you something. Everybody on welfare, they're already on Medicaid. This is to expand Medicaid to at least 133% of the federal poverty level, which is low-wage working people. I'm telling you something. The bravest people in this country are the people that go out and work 40 hours a week and try to feed their kids and clothe their kids and make no money with it, and they deserve the right to have health care. When I was born at the end of World War II, the per capita income of Arkansas, my native state, was barely half the national average. When I was a little boy, my grandfather ran a country store in a predominantly African-American neighborhood. There were no food stamps. I hear them screaming about food stamps. The people who couldn't afford their food, who came in my grandfather's store, And I saw them when I was a little boy. And I saw my grandfather give them food and just write it down in a little ledger. Run the debts up. And I said, why are you doing this? He said, they are working people. They have no money. They work as hard as they can. They don't get paid much. And they have a right to feed their children. Anybody who's doing the best they can deserves the right to feed their children and provide them health care and be taken care of. We have too many people like that today. But if you have an ideology, it's, oh, the government helping the poor, we got to be against it. If you look at the facts, you got to be for it. It doesn't matter whether you're right, left, or somewhere in the middle. That's what this election is. And I could give you lots of other examples. If you're ideological, you want one set of rules for you and another set for everybody else. The same fellow that proposed to fingerprint poor people who couldn't pay their debts to the emergency room wanted to pin a medal on those people in Congress who didn't want America to pay its debts. That's what this debt ceiling deal is all about. The debt ceiling is a misnomer. The debt ceiling, here's the deal. Terry and I went to a Red Lobster the other day. We had a good time, and I changed my diet, but I did eat a couple of bites of one of the biscuits, even though I And it's like we put it on a credit card bill, okay? And Red Lobster gets paid. And then at the end of the month, we get the credit card bill, and we decide, well, that wasn't such a good deal after all. That's what Congress was talking about doing, and that's why it was so devastating to us around the world. Now they want to cut all these working people off food stamps. You think they want the food stamps? You think they like the fact that they're putting in full time at work and they still don't have enough money to feed their kids? It is somehow charity and welfare for us to make sure these kids are not malnourished when they show up in school and their brains are developing, and we want them to learn, and we want them to succeed, and we want them to feel like they're part of our American community. All over the world there's a global shortage of jobs, especially for the young. In America, there's a big job problem for middle-aged people who need to work another 15 or 20 years, who lost their jobs in the financial crash, and either can't get new ones or can't get ones paying what they made before. These are serious problems. They do not have easy solutions. They have global implications. Does anybody seriously think we're going to address these problems if we spend all our time fighting over this other stuff and majoring in the minors? No, we've got to get the best people together, put our heads together, figure out what works. I'll tell you what works. I work now through my foundation on every continent. I work all over the world. And I travel America a lot. You just look at the places in America that are in better shape today than they were before the crash. Without exception, there are places where there is extraordinary cooperation. Business, government, labor, universities, philanthropic groups, everybody's working together to figure out what are we good at and build on it and get something done. Terry McAuliffe has often been derided in this campaign by the other side who say they're principled and he's a deal maker. Now, when you watch that mess in Washington in the last couple of weeks, didn't you say, oh, for one deal maker? Virginia was the home of many of the most important founders of this country. The founding fathers set up a system that requires honorable compromise. Dividing powers at the national and state level, dividing powers between the executive, legislative, and judicial, making it harder to get anything done through the differences in the way the Senate and the House work. I mean, they set it up because they were most worried about abuse of power They have enough flexibility in our Constitution that we can grow and meet the changes of each new age, but only if we can make principled compromises. The subtitle of the U.S. Constitution might well be The Art of the Deal. And we can laugh about it, but you can't run anything over the long term and build it up unless you include people who are different from you. And you bring people with different strengths, different knowledges, different experiences, different opinions together for the purpose of getting something done, not of endless conflict. That's the most important thing here, folks. Terry McAuliffe will major in the majors, not the minors. And these Republicans know perfectly well what position he's taken on all the issues. He's been very forthright and very outspoken, as he was today, on any number of issues. But they think he will get the show on the road. There is this hunger in America to see our country moving again. And Virginia has I'll say it again, you've got so many assets. It is crazy to be bogged down. And for all of you who are young, you just remember this. If you want an interdependent world of shared prosperity, shared opportunities, and shared responsibilities, you have got to have one that is inclusive and works on a cooperation model, not a conflict model. Say is this: if the public opinion surveys are right, more Virginians agree with Terry than with his opponent. But some people have voted, but most people haven't yet. And that's why he wanted you to all wave your little cards. And when Hillary was here a few days ago, she said, I wave my card. You wave your card when you get down here, so I'm doing it. You can give me a good report. Here's why it's important. In the presidential elections in 2008 and 2012, 72% of the registered voters in Virginia voted. You know what the number was in the last governor's race in 2009? 40%. 4-0. A full third of the registered voters fell off. And over 40% of those voting fell off. That's why we're still here. That's why you have to do this. Nothing's happened yet. And every one of you here, if you make up your mind, could get 10 more people to go to the polls who would otherwise be disinclined to vote by talking about these subjects. And especially you young people. You all clapped when Terry said he wanted to protect voting rights. I guess it's because you've read what happened when people like his opponent get elected governor and control the legislature in other states. But let me just give you 2 examples so you'll know how personal this is to your personal empowerment. In Texas, after the Supreme Court decided we didn't need the Voting Rights Act anymore, they immediately implemented their photo ID requirements, admitting that since you have to have a state-issued photo ID, if you are a poor Latino worker south of San Antonio in Texas and you don't have a driver's license, you would have to go 50 miles each way, an average of 100 miles to get a photo ID. But there are 2 exceptions in Texas to the requirements of government-issued photo ID. You know what they are? If you have a photo ID from a Texas State Institution of Higher Education, it doesn't count. You can't vote with it. The other one is if you got a concealed carry permit, which doesn't have your picture, you don't need a photo ID. Please vote. I couldn't make this up, folks. Then in North Carolina, 2 years south, you know, North Carolina has always been in a way one of the glorious success stories of higher education in the American South. It is thick with colleges, and it's long stayed from east to west. In North Carolina, they have a state income tax, and you get to deduct your kid. You get to take the child tax deduction. Under the new photo ID law, if your child is a student, in an institution of higher education in North Carolina, you can only deduct your child if he or she comes home to vote. But if he stays or she stays in the college town and they run their numbers up and they dictate the outcome of the local races, you lose your tax deduction. This is all about voter fraud, you understand? This has nothing to do with stripping people of their right to have their voice heard. This is a big election. And it is a metaphor for all of you for the way the next 20 or 30 years in America and all around the world is going to play out. There are a lot of problems. It's frustrating solving hard problems. You don't succeed every day. And it's better to divert people and divide them and get them all torn up and upset. And the one political shining virtue of extremism is that if you can get people so torn up and upset that there's steam coming out of their ears instead of light bulbs going off in their head, they all vote every time the polls are open. And people who are more calm, more rational, see things in a fair and balanced and a little bit of this, a little bit of that way, they often don't vote. You have to make sure that if you want a cooperation model to be the conflict model for Virginia's future, you show up and you bring other people to the polls. It is the whole deal, and the young people here have the biggest stake in this. So when you do it, this is about you, and you will be so proud when you elect Terry McAuliffe and that whole team. They are looking out for your future. You should have a government that is about you and about getting the smartest people from all over Virginia and the people with the widest variety of experience to put their heads together to solve problems that are global in scope, because you are better positioned to take advantage of the 21st century world than nearly any place in America. I still think it can be the most prosperous, the most exciting, the most peaceful time in human history, but only if we choose cooperation over conflict. Thank you, and God bless you.